Welcome to Beyond the Mask. We're tackling a topic that every clinician experiences but few openly discuss: failure. In healthcare, and especially in anesthesia, we're trained to pursue perfection. The stakes are high, the margin for error is small, and the culture often rewards those who appear to have everything under control. But behind every experienced clinician, every educator, and every leader is a journey filled with difficult moments, mistakes, and lessons learned the hard way. Today's guest believes those moments aren't something to hide, they're something to learn from. Dr. Stephen Pilot is a nurse anesthesiologist, educator, and leader dedicated to advancing professional growth and resilience and psychological safety in healthcare. He serves as an assistant professor in the Rutgers University doctoral program in nurse anesthesiology and is the current president of the New Jersey Association of Nurse Anesthetists. Steve has become known for his innovative approach to education, creating space for clinicians and students to openly discuss difficult experiences, normalize mistakes, and transform failure into powerful opportunities for reflection and growth. One of his most impactful initiatives is what he calls confession sessions. He invites learners to share experiences anonymously, creating an environment of vulnerability, honesty, and psychological safety. Today we'll explore why failure is so difficult to talk about in healthcare, how embracing it can help develop a true growth mindset, and what happens when clinicians realize they're not alone in the struggles that shape their careers. So if you've ever had a moment in your career that kept you up at night or taught you something you'll never forget, this conversation is for you.
CRNA Financial Planning is a sponsor of Beyond the Mask podcast. Investment advice offered through Private Advisor Group. Nothing in this podcast should be construed as investment advice. Plus, did you know listening to our podcast can earn you Class B credits? For details on how to submit, visit the CE credit section at beyondthemaskpodcast.com. Welcome to Beyond the Mask, innovation and opportunities for CRNAs and advanced practice nurses, with certified financial planner Jeremy Stanley and CRNA Sharon Pierce. Jeremy Stanley has worked with CRNAs for more than 23 years, and Sharon Pierce is a former president of the AANA and the NCANA. Join us as we leave the operating room and learn the latest in the CRNA and advanced practice nurse industries. Beyond the Mask starts in 10, 9, 8, 7.
And listeners, I have a special guest in addition with me today, somebody who has dissed me for just a little while, and finally I've got her back in the fold. My sometimes co-host.
I think your favorite co-host.
Absolutely, Tracy Castleman. So for listeners who haven't heard of you lately, since you've dissed me so much, why don't you tell a little bit about yourself before we dive into this topic?
I think everybody knows who I am, Sharon, if they've listened. They don't need to know about me. They really want to hear about Steve and what he has to say. But Tracy Castleman, I am from the great state of New Jersey, which is why I was able to convince Dr. Pilot to come and speak with us today. I am just a practicing CRNA at this point, past president.
Oh my God, you sound like Larry Hornsby. I'm
just a poor boy from Chickasaw, scratching out a living.
Yeah.
I do run I'm president of our charitable arm in New Jersey. We're the only state that has a charitable arm, New Jersey Cares, or NJANA Cares, where we do good around the state for communities of healthcare disparity. And I'm just a practicing CRNA at this point, and I am quite happy to be there.
Just a practicing CRNA.
No, it is kind of nice to be at this point in my career. I have changed jobs, and I am now the seasoned old lady in the group.
Anesthesia grandma.
I am, but it's okay because it's really exciting to see the changes in the growth and the advancement in nurse anesthesiology. And I'm sitting back working with all these young guns who just impress the hell out of me every day. And so it's a good place to be, actually, in my career. But enough about me.
And you're the reason we're all here.
No, I am not the reason.
true.
But,
You know, you paved the way for us. Give respect where it's due.
well, thank you, Sweet Pea. But, you know, we talked a little bit before we got on this. Sharon and I were talking about our mentors and our giants who might not be as relevant today, but they're giants to us, but they were the ones who lent us the shoulders.
That's true.
And as I've said before, I thought it was really important that we lend the shoulders to the next people. And it's what you're doing too, Steve. So thank you.
So with that, Steve, we'll let you have the floor for just a minute between us two gathering women here. So outside of the introduction, tell us a little bit more about you.
So I entered nursing as a second career.
Well, what was the first?
So the first was very brief as a lab tech in a lab where we created immunoassays to test for different types of
Jesus,
diseases.
you were too smart for that.
It was, I had to get it out of there. And that was short-lived, but really my background was bartending and
All right.
customer service and, you know,
That's
anesthesia.
and I was like, you know what? Had I known about anesthesia first and thought
But
it would
anesthesia's bartending. And
It is.
That's what I said, customer service.
you make people feel good, you make them forget, you know, and they're always happy to see you, is what I always tell people.
That is true.
So that was my past life. I went into nurse anesthesia about 6 years ago. I graduated from CRNA school up in New
it
Jersey.
only been 6
It's only
years?
been 6 years.
Holy cow, you
Wow,
have
and
accomplished a tremendous
already
amount.
president of your state. Congratulations.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to serve, you know, the CRNAs in New Jersey, and it's an honor to teach at Rutgers University. I'm so passionate. I love what I do, and I'm just happy to share this with everyone.
I love that. And it's true. He really does. And you are like that every place. You really are. We're
Thank
so
you.
lucky to have you.
Well, let's dive right into this topic. So, in a profession where mistakes can have serious consequences, dire consequences, how did you become interested in talking openly about failure? And that's something we all want to hide from.
You know, that you're absolutely right. It's something we all want to hide from. And like I said, I came from a background where I really wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And
Yeah, but clearly you weren't failing.
let me get there. Let me get there. So actually, you might think that, you know, you just gave me my accolade of, you know, in 6 years you've become the president of New Jersey, you're teaching at Rutgers University. But I really had a pretty difficult journey getting here. You know, my undergrad, I got a little lost along the way. I actually ended up dropping out of college. Took about 2 years off, bartended, sat around, tried to figure out where my life was at. And at that point, I thought that nursing might be the way to go. And I applied to Rutgers University for the RN program, and they actually rejected me because, you know, I didn't do so hot in that first round. And I looked at that and I was like, you know what? I'm looking at this as a challenge. And I'm not going to let this failure get me down. And I went back and I finished my degree in biology, and then worked for a short amount of time and applied for the accelerated nursing program, which I got into. And then applied to Rutgers again for my DNP. And now I teach there, and I always laugh. I'm like, you know, you rejected me the first time, and I just wouldn't go away. So there were a lot of failures along the way. And one thing I like to point out to, you know, the nurse anesthesia residents I interact with is just because you see this final product does not mean that I didn't have a journey to get here. And that journey was so built on failure. And that's when I learned the most.
Right.
And when you talk about how did I come about wanting to talk about it openly, I felt like when I was standing in front of a classroom and I would share my lessons and my stories, it was when I opened up about things that went wrong clinically that they'd really be on the edge of their seat, like, well, then what happened? And what did you do? And how were you able to grow from that? And I was like, you know what? I need to look at this a little deeper. And we need to examine how we could turn this into some sort of learning opportunity, because it just was like a game changer. It was like a light bulb went off.
I hate to sound like an old lady. Man, I'm going to sound like a grandmother.
You don't act like an old lady. Well,
You don't look like an old lady either.
That's the even better part of it. Though we did take a nap this afternoon at Tracy's house.
Because we polished off a bottle of champagne during the baby shower. But
Angie Munn's grandbaby's coming.
anyway, when I listen to people talk about what's going on with this generation, and that's where I feel like a grandmother saying that, resilience is not part of their foundation anymore. It's a different world. We grew up, Sharon and I grew up at a different time. We were my generation was the original latchkey kid. Richard Wilson talks about that generational learning. And I think it's not failure, it's resiliency. There's a difference when you look at it one way or another. And I do think you're teaching these students who have been very forward thinking, have to be front of their class in high school, front of their class in nursing, front of their class or front of their cohorts in working as a nurse. In order to be front of their class in anesthesia, nobody allowed them to be less than A+. And so you don't learn how to pick yourself up when you take a misstep. So,
well, we're rewarded for perfection.
But it's also that generation didn't have the opportunity
to fail.
Well,
we didn't let them. We raised them, Tracy.
I let my kids fail.
Well,
and it took one of my sons a long time to come around.
Right.
Right.
No,
you're right.
I know that.
So anyway, go on. I'm agreeing with.
So why do you think that failure is so hard to talk about?
So I think that when we think about failure, we equate failure with making an error. And in healthcare, when we make an error, there can be dire consequences, especially with what we do in the anesthesia world. One minor misstep can lead to a death in the operating room. Error equals harm. Mistake equals consequence and penalty on that practitioner. And then when you think about when that happens, the shame that comes along with it.
I think that is the word. Brene Brown, shame.
Oh, I love Brene Brown.
Oh my God, I do too.
Yeah. And it's like, I'd rather internalize this rather than share my failure, be judged by my peers, and develop this reputation of someone who doesn't know how to take care of a patient. And I think the truth is that healthcare is built on a culture that expects perfections from humans that are working in imperfect systems.
Ooh, that's a great line. That is a great line.
I also think nurses are not forgiving to nurses.
I absolutely agree with that.
Physicians back each other up.
That's
Even
true.
if there's a mistake, they will go to the grave with their colleagues. And it's like nurses look for that opportunity to tear you down if you calculated wrong. Even if you came to somebody else and said, can you double check my math? Everybody else, those other nurses, can you believe they couldn't figure out how? We hear it.
Well, look at Redonda Voigt, whom I interviewed on this podcast. She self-disclosed afterwards that it was her fault, and she was prosecuted for that. So,
and how about the nurse who gave the heparin in the NICU who killed herself?
Yes.
She wound up hanging herself, I think, right? So this is real, what you're talking about.
This is real. And, if you think about this idea of the second victim, Dr. Wu coined that terminology.
And Maria Van Pelt, Dr.
Van Pelt, she definitely opened this world for me. A lot of what I do now was based on me sitting in a lecture that she gave, and it moved me so much that I was like, she's absolutely right. Like, this is huge. How are we going to combat that?
You've probably wondered at some point, should I stay W-2 or go 1099? And more importantly, what would that mean for my income? AANA has launched a new 1099/W-2 income comparison calculator designed to help you compare W-2 compensation with potential 1099 earnings in just minutes. It also helps you understand how taxes, deductions, and expenses could impact your take-home pay. Try the 1099/W2 calculator today and see how your potential earnings compare. Visit aana.com/1099 calculator to explore the tool, or check this episode's description for the link. The 1099/W2 income calculator, helping CRNAs better understand the financial side of their career choices. Remember, that's aana.com/1099 calculator.
We sat together, didn't we?
We did. We did.
We did.
So what role does failure play in developing clinical expertise and resilience, just like Tracy was talking about earlier?
So I think that failure has to be the catalyst to learn and grow. And if we can take a moment where a failure occurs, examine why it occurs, we can really dissect the problem and grow from there to ensure that it never happens again. I was with a nurse anesthesia resident in the OR, one of my residents actually, and I could tell he was a little nervous. It was the first time we were together, and he went to intubate and put it right in the esophagus, not once but twice.
Oh, snap.
And I could tell that he was a little flustered, he was a little embarrassed, and he looked at me and he's like, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm like, why are you apologizing to me? I said, what did you learn from this? And he's like, well, I realized the tube wasn't in. I didn't have end tidal, I didn't have chest rise, I didn't have condensation. And I said, and what did you do? I took it out and I put it back in. I said, and now for the rest of your life, when that happens, you're gonna remember this moment and you're never gonna let that happen again. And I disclosed to him, I was like, you know what's actually funny is I went to intubate this morning and I put it right in the esophagus. It happens to the best of us. You know, I just didn't have a good view. I was like, let me just try, let me see. No intent. I was like, someone grab the glide scope. Let's put this tube in. I got it in the second time. And he just like looked at me like he was in such disbelief, like that could happen to me.
Right.
And I was like, the most important thing in my moment was I realized, I told everyone, I was like, I need a second. Someone grab the glide scope. Let's ventilate the patient and let's make sure that we do the right thing.
Right.
And I think this conversation really is most important for the clinical instructors, because I've done the same thing too. It's okay. Your patient wasn't in harm. You figured out the problem. Your patient stayed well and you fixed it. As long as you can, and that's always something I talk about before we go in the OR. What do you anticipate as a problem? How are you going to prevent it? If the problem happens, what are you going to do to fix it? I said, as long as you can fix it, you keep your patient safe, and taking that pressure off of them and allowing them to critically think, because I think that's also part of resilience, right? It's a failure if you stop, put your hands up in the air and say, I'm done, and everything goes wrong.
And that's the whole idea of a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset. And it's like with a growth mindset, we're taking these quote unquote failures and using it to push ourselves forward. If we just decompensated, then we would never be able to grow.
Although, you know, real quick, I was thinking about, I can't remember what they're called, one of the self-driving taxis.
Oh, yeah.
Remember the one
the
that
Tesla.
went around the school bus with the stop sign out and then also drove into the police crime scene? And the owner got up and he said, you know, although these were not good things, they presented as opportunities for us to continue to improve the software to ensure that our cars are the safest on the road. That's what you're saying. It's the same thing. So you went around the stop sign with the school bus and your driverless taxi drove over a few kids. Anyway.
I don't know if that's exactly what I'm saying.
What I'm saying. But
Sharon, did I say that?
no,
I don't think you did.
I didn't say anything about the kids.
but what I'm saying.
Take the kids. That's what you said.
I love those kids.
Shut down the program and take all the cars off the road. They
Right.
looked at it as a way to improve the software.
That's true.
These are opportunities to improve your software. Okay, so
I like that. That's a good line too, Tracy. Y'all are hitting on it.
So you just talked about the difference between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. So how do you explain the difference to clinicians working in the high-stake environment like the OR? Again, the clinical instructors and or the students, the residents, how do you explain the difference in order to use these opportunities to move from fixed to growth?
Of course. So when you think about a fixed mindset, what do you think? It's like stagnant, it's not moving. And when you think about the clinical setting, it's these mistakes equal incompetence. And if you approach someone with that mindset, the mistake that you made shows that you don't know what you're doing, then the reaction is defensive. That was a personal attack on the resident or learner. And that leads to failure, which is going to lead to that shame that we talked about, and the avoidance and just shutting down, and eventually leading to burnout and stress and complete silence after an event. What I like to do is promote this growth mindset where it's like, okay, like you said, Sharon, this mistake is now an opportunity to learn. And if we approach it that way, the resident is going to look at you and the feedback is going to be constructive rather than destructive to them. And hey, let's sit down, let's grab a drink, let's grab a coffee, let's talk about what happened. What went well? What didn't go well? Was it something that was a system problem that was unavoidable that caused this adverse outcome to happen? Or is it something that maybe you just haven't been exposed to yet? And then the failure turns from that shame to an opportunity of reflection and resilience, like you said, Tracy, and then just adopting a new way of thinking to fix that problem so it doesn't happen again. And that's when you enter that state of like psychological safety that I'm so invested in.
Well, I do think, actually, Tracy and I were talking about this earlier today, that the older you get and the further along you get in your career, it doesn't bother you as much because your ego is not tied into your success as much. And you know that these things are going to happen. Used to, if I couldn't get an IV, it really bothered me. And then somebody else would step in and they get it the first time. One of the places I work, and these nurses are amazing. Occasionally I'll have to be called out to start an IV. And I say, I can look like nothing but a hero here. I have an excuse. Well, everybody else tried. They couldn't get it. I couldn't get it either.
Right.
And if I get it, then I'm the hero. I said, I have nothing to lose in this situation. But my ego is not as tied into my performance as it used to be.
The young guns now who I work with who are doing all the fancy stuff, and I'm good sitting back watching them. Yes. I'm proud of them. I'm happy that they want to do it, and anything I can do to support and elevate them is a good thing. I think also when you're going back and talking with the residents, I think it's also an opportunity for them to either say, you know what, I wasn't as prepared as I could be. Okay, that's enough of an answer. Right. Life gets in the way. That's always a phrase I used with my residents. Sometimes life gets in the way. You're an adult, you might have children, things happen, and some days, even to us, we come in, we didn't sleep as well. There's a life event, we're not thinking the same way. Or an opportunity to come back and say, I really need to improve that skill set. When you're in school or even amongst each other, and say, Dr. Pilot, I need more time in sim. Or, it seems to me that that's some of the space you're opening up in the psychological safe space. Yeah. Is that?
Psychological safe space, absolutely.
Where they can come in and say, I need a little bit more time. I'm struggling with this skill set. Instead of being afraid to come in and say, I'm struggling with it, there's a space for them to come in and say, can you help me?
My hope is that my residents feel as though they can come and tell me anything without being judged or ridiculed. Because when you open that two-way communication, it will lead to more important, heavier conversations down the road when it's not clinical skills-based, but hey, I'm struggling with my wellness or mental health.
But I also love the idea that you're creating the future, right? This is small ripples create a big wave, right? Each year you're doing this, you're sending out more and more providers who might teach one other person.
That's exactly what I was thinking. And
you're changing the culture, and I think that's awesome. So I really want to talk about the confession sessions. I think of you as the Godfather every time I do this. I can see you up there in your suit with the kiss the pinky with the ring. But I love this, and you and I have talked about it once or twice, which is why I talked to Sharon, because I think it's so forward-thinking. It's so necessary. So tell me about it.
A few years ago, I was teaching this quality safety course in our curriculum at Rutgers. And we were transitioning from doing quality improvement projects for DMP projects to they're doing systematic reviews now. We had a little trouble with our clinical partners being able to implement the quality improvement projects within the time frame. Right. So we had to think out of the box. So I felt like the weight on my shoulders was a little heavier because the quality improvement process is so important with what we do. And I was like, how am I really going to engage my residents? And it was around the same time that we sat at that lecture with Dr. Van Pelt. And I was thinking about the second victim syndrome and, all this provider stuff. And I was like, how can I tie this all together? And maybe you don't remember, but in 2004, as a millennial that I am, there was this thing called Post-Secret. And what people would do is they would create postcards with a secret on it, mail it into this website, and the website would post the secrets, and people would comment. And it was a way to just express how you were feeling anonymously without identifying who you were. And then I imagine the people that mailed in the secrets would go and see what the feedback looked like. And I always thought it was amazing. For someone who kept the secret for a very long time in my personal life, I am a gay man, I would look there for advice and I would see what other people were saying. And anytime I saw something about dealing with, their sexuality, I felt like it always hit home for me. And I was like, how can I potentially turn something that made such a huge difference in my personal life into something that could make a huge difference in my professional life? And I went to the literature and I was looking, I can't even tell you what the search, terms were, but I found this study in 2008 about this idea of, it was a circuit, electrician circuit conference, where they had people write down what they called goofs prior to coming into the conference. And then what they did at the conference was they would read the goofs and all of the electricians would kind of comment on what happened. And I was like, wow, that's a really great idea. I wonder if it's ever been used in anesthesia. So when I did my literature review, I actually saw that there was a study in 2015 where a physician anesthesiologist was using it with his residents to open lines of communication with them because he was having trouble having them open up. And he said, listen, if you write down what you're doing anonymously, we'll talk about it at our weekly meetings. I'll pull one each week. It will be like the icebreaker. And I was like, that's really great. And some of them were really funny. It was like, my intubation rate is lower than an average MLB home run hitter. And then, someone wrote the thing that grosses me out the most about being in the operating room is how we just leave the wires on the floor and expect someone's going to come pick them up. And I was like, that's a great start. I want to use this to teach the quality improvement projects and the quality improvement process. And what I did with the first cohort, which was about 3 years ago, was I had them submit anonymous things that happened to them in clinical. Because I thought that would be a great way to really get them invested in fixing a problem. So at that time we had 24 residents per cohort. They all submitted anonymous confessions based on clinical scenarios, and I chose 6 for them to break down in groups and look at where they think the failure happened, why they think the failure happened, what was the anesthetic implications of the failure, and what could they do to improve the process to ensure that that failure never happened again. And it went so much better than I ever thought it would. I was blown away by some of the things that these kids shared with us. And true to the assignment, they sat down and they broke down this process failure and said, this is what we think went wrong. Like, I could think one of them was where a kid desaturated going from the OR to the PACU, and when the PACU was there, they didn't have any pediatric ambu bags, they didn't have any pediatric stuff, so their solution was, we're gonna create a pediatric airway emergency cart just in case this ever happens. Simple enough, but really solved the problem. Then at the end of the semester, I asked them to evaluate what they thought about the program. And I thought it was gonna be like, it was a great way to learn the quality improvement project. We really were invested because, you know, it was us talking. And the feedback couldn't have been different. It all talked about mental health. It talked about how being able to dissect what went wrong really put into perspective what happened. And at the end of each semester, we have our residents anonymously evaluate our courses. It's called the CRS evals. And that semester, one of the residents wrote something that it still sticks with me, was, I have been struggling for over a year with this situation that happened to me in clinical. And through this project, I was able to finally get closure and see what happened was not my fault. Wow. And when you think about the second victim effect and the second victim syndrome, the best way to combat that is to have an audience of your peers that understand the process, who can sit down with you and be like, let's work through this. Like, it wasn't your fault. It was a system error. Or, you know, there's nothing that I would have done personally different. And that gives people a lot of comfort. And that's what we were doing in this classroom. And it was so incredibly powerful.
And he won't be paralyzed by anything like that going forward as a provider, also providing care. He feels better, and the care he gives is better.
Hey, a quick heads up for those of you who like travel and learning combined. Nurse Anesthesia Update is coming up November 30th through December 3rd at Atlantis Paradise Island in the Bahamas. This CRNA-focused program covers practical anesthesia topics, common challenges, and emerging trends, and features Beyond the Mask host Sharon Pierce, of course, former AANA president, as part of the faculty. You can earn up to 20 Class A CE credits, including pharmacology, while enjoying one of the most incredible destinations out there. Check the link in the show notes to learn more and register.
I don't remember how the process was because it was a long time ago since I was in school, but we would have these sessions after clinicals, and we would talk about what had happened to us and our failures, our errors. One of my classmates, you know, everybody gives a paralytic at some point before they give the hypnotic. I don't think I have, but it's amazing I haven't. But my classmates were all very open about
We were very different. It's very competitive. Like my class,
I think you are right.
We kind of were like, you know, we helped each other survive.
Yes.
You know, our biggest gripe, there was one guy who used to clip his toenails in the classroom every now and then.
Oh my God.
That we did not like, and we let him know.
That's a mistake we can't learn from.
But I don't remember, and my class we were a range of age. I was the youngest, the oldest had served as a nurse in Vietnam and Japan. I mean, we ran the gamut of age, and we were not competitive against each other.
I think you just brought up a good point. My class was not. One of my classmates thought she was giving neostigmine and she gave sucks.
I don't think we were competitive either, but I do think that there was this, hey, you show up for class on Monday, especially that first semester when you start clinical, it's like, I put in 3 A lines.
Yes.
Well,
there's always that.
I intubated upside down while the patient was prone, and it's like, I missed 3 intubations last week and blew 4 IVs.
The big joke in my class was, when was Tracy going to be able to intubate? Because I couldn't intubate with the Miller blade. Some anesthesiologist put the Mac blade in my hand. I'm like, oh my God, I see quartz. I was the last one. I could not intubate at the beginning with the Miller blade, but the Mac blade was just like, it was the best thing that ever happened to me. I don't know. But I think what you're talking about is different too. And I think the stakes are higher.
I think it's different. And I think that The biggest issue I find is that when people have these failure events, they think I am the only person that's ever been through this. I'm the only person that's ever felt this way. And it's not till you sit down with your peers and your mentors that you're like, oh, it's actually happening to others as well. And that gives you that like sense of support. It normalizes your emotions. You know, it's that psychological first aid.
But I also think, again, going back to the difference, we're old, remember? We're the grandmothers over here.
Please.
We went to school.
Old is not how I describe myself.
We went to
We are
school
aging with audacity.
prior to the World
I am
Wide Web.
anyway.
So we had to work together. You
Yes.
sat in the classroom. We didn't remote learn.
That is so
We
true.
sat together. There wasn't a World Wide Web. We had to open up a book. You had to go to the library. You shared resources. You know, who wants to spend all freaking day in the Dewey Decimal System trying to go into the card catalog to find your book? I would tell Sharon, oh, here's the book. Just go over this. Let's say we did not go to school together. These kids didn't have that same opportunity. And
that's
you
a
are
very good point.
bringing them back into that kind of the women who did the wash, right, around the wash center or the well, right? That was an opportunity to talk and share, and that's what you're doing. And
you are exactly right, Tracy.
so smart.
She is so smart.
So what advice would you give a student or a young clinician who feels devastated after making a mistake?
I would say that the first thing you need to do is find someone that you trust and pull them aside and let them know what's wrong and make them have that conversation with you. Because here's the other part of it. We're all very, very busy people. And it's very easy as someone who's not involved in a situation to be like, it was fine, don't worry about it. And I find that that's what also was happening a lot, that I really needed to deal with. And I learned that lesson because a very good friend had an adverse event happen in the operating room. And he pulled me aside and he was like, I just don't understand what happened. And I was like, you didn't do anything, it's fine. And I brushed him off. And that's another failure on my part that I had to learn from, because knowing what I know now, I should have dropped what I was doing, said, let's go for a walk, let's go down to the cafeteria, let's grab a cup of coffee, let's talk about this. Because what he needed in that moment was for me to be the ear on that same level as him. You know, we're both CRNAs, we're both educated the same way, and he needed me to talk him through what happened, because that's what was going to help him start the healing process. And I didn't do that. And I urge anyone going through this to really emphasize, I need to talk, because a lot of us are going to do the same thing. We're going to brush off, it's fine, don't worry about it, it wasn't a big deal, move on. But if he said to me, Steve, no, I'm really shook about this, I would have been like, you're absolutely right, I'm so sorry, let me drop what I'm doing. Because I think any of us in this family we called nurse anesthesiology would do that for each other. But sometimes you need a gentle reminder. So I would say, find someone you trust, make sure you talk to them honestly, don't leave out details, because sometimes we try to hide things. It's full disclosure, and that's going to start that healing process.
The opposite side of that is anybody who's listening, if somebody comes and says to you, I need to talk, even if you can't at that moment, you're running to start another case. I really want to sit down and talk with you. When can we talk this evening? Can we talk in a couple of hours? I've got to start this case, but I want to hear what you have to say. We had an event, a devastating event, a couple of years ago. And the day after, I called up the CRNA, and I think I was the only one. And I said, are you okay? I texted her first. I didn't call because I didn't want to intrude. Are you okay? I'm checking on you. No, I'm not okay.
Yeah.
And I said, what can I do? I'm here. Do you want to talk? And she said, it meant a lot that you reached out. Just somebody saying, are you okay? Not what did you do? And then I said, is it okay if I reach out to you again and check on you and stop by? I would appreciate that. And I think that, those little things, when somebody comes to you, gives you a safe space, even that brings down some of that anxiety.
when we talk about learning from our mistakes, I absolutely learned from that mistake with my friend. And it's really pushed me to make sure that everyone in my life knows that I'm a safe space for them if anything goes wrong. And maybe 2 days ago, I had a resident call me, and she's like, I'm worried about another resident. I think she may be suicidal.
Oh my.
She reached out to me, and I'm reaching out to you because I feel comfortable talking to you about that. And in that moment, I went right into, crisis management and talked to her, set up time to talk to someone else. And afterwards, this is gonna sound weird, but I actually was very happy that this person felt comfortable enough to call. I've been personally impacted by suicide. Tracy knows my story, and it's something I don't take lightly. And if one person feels comfortable coming to me and saying, this is what's going on, I just feel like it's such a win.
What is talking openly about failure, what has it taught you about yourself, Steve?
That's a really great question, Sharon. I guess talking about failure has showed me that all humans are imperfect, and that if you can sit down and you can internalize what kind of happened, you could start to forgive yourself. And for a very...
That's a tough one.
It's a really tough one. And for a very long time, I had been very hard on myself. Like I said, I had dropped out of college at one point. I thought my world was over when I didn't get admitted to Rutgers for my BSN the first time. And I thought, had I not made these mistakes, I would have been on this journey faster. And it turns into this spiral of shoulda, woulda, coulda. I feel bad for myself. And what I realize now is that everyone makes mistakes, and those are just opportunities to learn. And I've forgiven myself for the mistakes that I've made. And I think that's why I have been so successful in this later part of my life than the earlier part.
Yeah, you're in Mach 2 now.
Yeah, I think that I've been so successful because I've forgiven myself for what happened and used it as a catalyst for growth.
Your life is our lives are so much more interesting because they're not really failures, they're bumps in the road. That's another one I put in.
Yeah.
They're bumps in the road. And I do feel the journey is for a reason. Your journey up to this point, your failures, was to help save this resident, right? I mean, and if that's what all of this led to, then that's why you were, I do believe in some of that. So, what failure do you not tell people about?
Oh no, I tell everybody everything. Are you kidding? I've got a podcast. Everybody, I tell everything.
I will tell when the nurse anesthesia resident, I said one, I was the last one in my class to intubate. I'll tell you another one I've told them. I failed my boards on the first round by 1 point.
I don't know. Would I rather fail them by 1 point or a big margin?
450
just do it.
Because back then you sat for boards. They only gave it twice a year. You had to go to the place where they were getting June or December, and you sat and you filled out the board. You did the whole thing.
For 6
and they
weeks.
scored 450 was passing. I got a 449. I failed on the first boards. Now, I had also had my car totaled and had a miscarriage and was driving back and forth to work with tractor trailers in the snow. And I was still.
That's when we could work. Yes. You were a GRNA.
Yeah.
So you could
And I
work.
had severe PTSD, and I was unable to study. So I have a good excuse, but I have told residents that who are getting close to their boards and panicking, and they'll say, like you, they'll look at me and say, how, like,
there's no way. There's no
way that you are the one who failed the boards. I said, yep, I got it. Now, I said, when I got my act together, I crushed it, but I was unable to process information at the time, and I sat for boards, and then I worked where I went to school. So I had to face all of my clinical instructors that I failed. And that was really hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I've learned empathy.
Thank you for sharing that, because I think it's so important. And I was just talking with our residents that are about to graduate, and I kind of was saying something similar of, you know, everyone's going to tell you they passed in 100 questions because no one's going to admit what really happened. And the statistics show that not everyone passes in 100 questions. So how is it possible that every clinician you run into that's your preceptor will tell you that they did? And I shared something similar where when I took the NCLEX, I was hoping, 75 questions, it shuts off. And question 76 showed up. And you're like, oh no, what am I gonna do? And a lot of the literature out there shows that people fail in the next 5 questions because they decompensate when they see that question. And I had a really incredible professor, her name is Sharon Anderson. She was one of my undergrad professors. She's like, if question 76 shows up, you close your eyes, you sit back in your chair, you take a deep breath, and you know that you still have a fight left in you.
Oh, wow, I like
I
that.
like that.
It was the best advice I ever got. And I try to share that with all my nurse anesthesia residents now. Like, if question 101 shows up, listen, you still have a fighting chance. They think you still got this.
It didn't shut down.
Correct.
Right.
It's an adaptive test. Yeah.
I like it.
For me, what I learned was, how they do different first 5 questions, right? If you answer the first one right, you're more likely to continue to succeed. If you don't know the answer to the first one, you're going to go downhill. And so there were certain things that when I would be studying, I would get upside down or inside out. And I said, and it was mostly formulas just to, I made a list of, I think it was 49 things. And I wrote them down all day long. I had honed this list, the triangle of pressure and all that stuff. I had all these different things written down. And I would write it down 100 times a day. And that was when you had the blue book. Remember, you had the scratch book? They said, go. I opened up the scratch book. I wrote my list of 49 things down. I think I maybe answered 2 questions off of that, but just writing them and knowing. And when I got to that question, instead of my brain saying, oh my God, is the formula, I opened up to the front of the book, went back, and that's when I crushed the exam. But what I learned was I was talking myself out of.
Oh, yes.
Because I was so anxious.
Yeah.
And so I said, what are the things? So that's what I learned and improved. What about you?
Gosh, well, since I tell all my failures and I tell everything, and usually you're part of the people
The failure?
The listening part, the listening part. Oh, I failed a lot for sure. But as we kind of wrap this up, what would you like to leave our listeners with?
So I think the biggest thing that I've learned through all of this is that everyone makes mistakes. No matter how put together somebody looks, no matter how successful they are, everyone has a story about the journey it took to get there. And those stories are almost always including of failure. The problem is we usually only see this highlight reel, right?
I like that.
Yeah, we see this end product.
They think you're the golden girl, the golden boy.
Dr. Castleman. We see, Dr. Pilot standing up in front of this classroom. He must have everything together. He must have had a straight line journey from point A to point B.
Isn't that the truth?
They don't see the struggles that got there. They see the end product. They don't see the times I doubted myself. They don't see all the experiences that I wish I could redo because they just see the president of Angina. You know what I mean? I think through the confession sessions, I've definitely learned that we have to continue to share these stories openly because something truly powerful happens when we start an honest dialogue with each other. And at the end of the day, it's not the failure that defines us.
Isn't that the truth?
I love that. Thank you.
Yes. Well, Steve, as I want to tell you, thank you for joining us tonight. Great conversation. And again, we have all failed and we've all stumbled, and the difference is we all got up.
Yeah.
We all got up. And so if we can help somebody get up, that's what this is all about. And you've clearly put your hand out and helped a lot of people when they stumbled. And we appreciate that. And I want to thank my good friend Tracy Castleman.
And I want to thank you for allowing me back in to co-host with you.
And I want to thank both of you for being such wonderful human beings and mentor
Wait till you see us in the morning.
Quick question. Let's say there is a student or a resident or a nurse, anesthetist, who has a question and doesn't necessarily feel there's a safe space in their environment. Can they go to the AANA? Is there something through their wellness program, or is there a hotline?
I'm sure there is. I don't have that information offhand. I do know that there's a lot of resources out there available. 988 you can dial if you're having true, suicidal ideations, and they have trained experts to help you with that. There's a lot of information on the AANA's website that is all wellness based.
988, is that a text or a phone call?
It's a phone call. It's like 911, but for mental health issues. And then most universities also have a hotline that you can call if for some reason you're struggling. I hope that anyone can find someone as an administrator or a faculty in their program. We all got into this profession, education component, because we wanted to make a difference in our residents' lives. If anyone past or present that I taught ever called me, I would literally drop what I was doing for them. And I don't want to speak for every educator, but I have a feeling every educator in the country would probably do something very similar.
I think it's a wrap.
I think so.
Thank you for tuning in to Beyond the Mask. If you enjoy the show and want to help us grow, the best way to support us is simple. Leave a review on your favorite podcast platform, share the show on social media, and tell your friends. Your word of mouth is what keeps us going strong. We're proud to consistently rank in the top 50 medical podcasts nationwide and to be #1 in the CRNA community. All thanks to listeners like you. Your support helps us stay there, and we couldn't do it without you. We'll see you on the next Beyond the Mask.
Hi, this is Jackie Rolls, President and founder of Our Hearts, Your Hands, a global support anesthesia community. We'd like to thank all of our prior donors and also say that we are accepting donations, welcome donations, to send a nurse anesthetist or even a nurse from a low-resource country to get further academic education or attend professional conferences or even equipment for some companies. Thank you so much for your support.